Photoshop has a powerful text engine that makes adding type to documents quick and intuitive. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to add point text and then refine it using the options bar and the character panel. In order to create our own headline, we're going to select the type tool, or you can tap the T key on the keyboard. As soon as you select the type tool, you get all the different type options, including the ability to select a font and a family, as well as the size. I'm going to select Myriad Pro, regular, but feel free to select any typeface that you want. Then I'm going to set the font size to maybe 40 to begin with, and I'll click in the white banner in the image area. I'll type the word revive. And now, if I want to increase the size of my type, before I actually apply this type, I can hold down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on Windows, and then drag from any of the handles. If you select one of the corner handles, you can hold down the Shift key in order to keep the perspective of the font. As soon as you get it the way you want it, you can release. And then if I want to reposition the type, I just need to move my cursor away from the type and click and drag. In order to commit the type, I can either click on the check icon, or I can use the keyboard shortcut, Command key on Mac, the Control key on Windows, and tap Return or Enter. Notice that on the Layers panel, we now have a type layer, so this is re-editable at any time, and Photoshop has named the layer of the type whatever we typed in. To re-edit the text, we can either click with the type tool on top of the text. That will enter in an insertion point where we can edit the text. Or if I tap Escape in order to cancel that, I can also quickly select my type by double-clicking on the T icon in the Layers panel. You can see that the entire line of type is now selected. It's also reversed out just so that I can tell which area is selected and which area is not. Because when you work with type in Photoshop, you need to make sure that if you're trying to make a change, you've got the text selected that you want to affect. If you want to hide this highlight, you can use the Command key on Mac or the Control key on Windows and tap the H key. The first time that you do this, Photoshop's going to ask you if you'd like to use Command H to hide Photoshop, or if you want it to hide and show the extras like selections and guides. You won't see this on Windows, but the reason you see it on the Mac is because the system shortcut usually hides the application. I'm going to choose to hide extras, and now you can see that even though I have the type selected right now, I've hidden that inverted view of it. So if I use Command or Control H again, you can see that I can bring back that look, but I prefer when I'm changing my type to use Command or Control H in order to hide that. This can be especially useful when I'm trying to do something like change the color, for example. Because all of the type is selected, I'll use the color swatch in the options bar. I'll reposition it to move it out of the way, and then use the eyedropper in order to click on one of the colors in my image. I'll just select this green and click OK. The only thing about hiding what you have selected is that you do have to remember that it is actually selected. So in order to commit to this type, again, I can either click on the check mark or use the Command key on Mac, the Control key on Windows, and tap Return or Enter. And all of the type that's in Photoshop is vector-based type, which means that you can scale it as large as you want or as small as you want, and you're not going to lose any quality. So you don't have to worry about turning your type layers into smart objects. You can scale and skew them and change them as many times as you want, and they will still maintain the highest quality possible. Let's go ahead and add a quick outer glow to this headline type in order to separate it from the background. In the Layers panel, click the Effects icon and then Outer Glow. Reposition that. And I'll change the color to white by clicking on the color swatch, selecting white, and then make it a little larger, changing the size. Click OK, and we can toggle that off and on, and you can see how it just separates the text from the background photo. To add more type, I've created a note that we can copy from. In order to see the contents of the note, we can double-click on the note icon. If you don't see the Notes panel, you can always select it under the Window menu by choosing Notes. In order to make the Notes panel a little bit larger, I'll click at the bottom on the grabber bar and just drag down. Now I only want the first 2 lines here. We're just going to copy this to the clipboard. So I'll click and drag over those first 2 lines to select them, and then use Command-C on Mac or Control-C on Windows in order to copy those to the clipboard. And then we'll click on the left-hand side of our image in order to set a text insertion point. I know that it's going to be too large, and I can tell that by the size of the insertion point. So I will use the drop-down menu here and just choose 12 points. Before I paste the text, I might also want to check my other options. For example, I might want to change the color, so I'll select that. Choose black as my foreground color, and now use Command-V or Control-V on Windows in order to paste that type. You can see that there aren't any returns when Photoshop gets to the other side of the document. It just continues writing the text. So if I want to break the line, I need to do this manually when I'm using point type. So I'll position my cursor right before the F, unfortunately, and tap the Return or Enter key in order to manually break that line. In addition to the options that we have across the top, I also have an icon to show my character panel. If I click on that, the character panel appears, and we can see I have many of the same options, but then some additional options as well. Let's make sure that we have all of the types selected before we start making changes. Use the keyboard shortcut Command-A on Mac or Control-A on Windows to select all of the text. And then we can change the size, we can change the leading, we can change the kerning or the tracking. There are a variety of ways that we can make changes here. If I position my cursor on top of one of the icons and drag to the left or to the right, we can use our scrubby sliders. If I know the specific value that I want to enter, we can select it here and then just type in that value. Or we can use the drop-down menu and select a value from the list. And that works in all of these different options. If I wanted additional space between the 2 lines of text, that's when I would change my leading. I'll go ahead and raise it to 24 so you can see that additional space. If I want to put it back to the default, we can choose Auto. If I want to increase or decrease the space between each one of the letters, then I can select the tracking. Here I'll use my scrubby slider and click and drag to the right. You can see how there's additional space between each letter. Click and drag it to the left. We can see that there's less space. If I don't know how much there should be, I can simply set it to 0. That's the default spacing in the font. If I only want to change the spacing between 2 letters, say for example the S and the O, I would click between those 2 letters and then I would use the option to kern. As I drag to the right, you can see that it's only changing the amount of space between those 2 characters. In order to reset that, I'll choose Optical. Let's commit to this text by holding down the Command key on the Mac, the Control key on Windows, and then tapping the Return or Enter key. Tap the V key in order to get the Move tool and just reposition this text. Now, if I want to quickly make an edit to this text, but I don't have the Type tool selected, instead of selecting the Type tool, I can double-click on the T icon in the Layers panel. That not only selects the Type tool, but also selects all of my text. I'm going to tap the Escape key in order to get out of that. Now I've got my Move tool selected again, but this time I'm actually going to tap the T key in order to select the Type tool. If you want to quickly move through the different fonts, you want to select the Type tool, but don't select any of the text in your image. In this state, if you tap the Return or the Enter key, you'll notice that the font is highlighted. Then I can use my downward pointing arrows to move down through the fonts that I have installed on this machine, or I can use the up arrow in order to go back up on the list of all the fonts in the machine. If I have the Type tool selected and I want to start working on a different text layer, All I need to do is position my cursor on top of that other text and then click. You can see in my Layers panel that I'm no longer working on the top type layer. Instead, I'm working on the Revive type layer. If I want to make a change to this, we'll do a quick Select All by using Command A or Control A, and then I'm going to change this from regular to bold. In order to commit to that, use the Command key on Mac, the Control key on Windows, and tap Return or Enter. If I need to nudge this into place, I can tap the V key to get my Move tool, and then just use my arrow keys in order to reposition it. At this point, let's go ahead and save this document. I'll choose File, and then Save As, and I'm going to add an O1 after it. That way we can use this in the next video as well. I'll click Save, and then OK. So there you go, an introduction to point type, otherwise known as headline type, in Photoshop.